Hi guys, I'm redoing the honors enrichment video because I found an error, but not with completing the square. I'm going to go through completing the square here. I'm not going to write this part out because it's already written, but the parabola part I found an error. I don't know. I just forgot about a negative sign, which makes a big difference when you're doing math, as you know. Okay, so completing the square one more time first. So here are some problems. You guys did good with completing the square. I checked over the assignments that were turned in. Remember, when you click turn in, make sure there are things attached. I'm getting at least a third of my assignments with nothing attached. So I'll use blue today since this is already written. So completing the square, A is 1. We take half of B. So 8 divided by 2 is 4. And then we square it. So C is 16. And this new part becomes x plus 4 times x plus 4, which is this quadratic right here. And now 15 is still hanging out here, but since I added 16, I have to take 16 away. And so that's 15 minus 16 is negative 1. Now to solve for the x-intercepts, this is the same thing twice, multiplied by itself, so it's squared. And then I take the square root right here, because the opposite of squared is square root. And the square root of 1 is a plus and a minus 1. So that means there's two answers on that right side, a plus 1 and a minus 1. So I have to add 1. So this is to move this, I have subtract 1 and subtract 1. So I get 1 minus 1, which is 0. And negative 1 minus negative 1 is a negative 2, if I found an error. Another one. Okay, now for the bottom one, and this one, no need to complete the square because it's difference of squares. Remember difference of squares? When you have something squared, that's a difference. And when you have something squared minus another thing squared, and 4 is a perfect square. Difference, because that is a subtraction problem. Product is multiplication, quotient is division, difference is subtraction. So difference of squares, you just factor it, and here, easy peasy, x equals plus 2 and x equals minus 2. You could write your answer like that. You could write x equals twice. You could use only 1 with the plus and minus sign. That takes care of writing two different answers. That's telling me there are two answers, a plus 2 and a minus 2. Okay. So also difference of squares. Remember, we always want 0 on the right-hand side. Now, I'll talk about that arrow in just a second. So I added the 7, and I got this. Now we do this difference of squares with the 10. Half of 10 is 5. 5 squared is 25. And so since I added 25, I have to take away 25. And I get negative 64. So this is the way we've been doing difference of squares. You add 64, take the square root. And square root of 64, it's a perfect square, it's plus or minus 8. Then I minus 5, minus 5. So your two answers are 8 minus 5, which is 3, and negative 8 minus 5, which is negative 13. So this little bird was an arrow and it turned into a bird in my last video, but I had to delete it because of my following errors. So also, instead of doing this, if you know you're going to have to solve it, and I know I have to solve because it has an equal sign, instead of moving the 7 left, you could also move the negative 46 right. So I'm going to add 46 to this side. So this right side is just the number, so negative 7 plus 46. And then on this left side, I only have the two terms, which is not a square at all, and I add the 25. Sorry, I don't have anything to drink here. So when I add 25 here on the left, I have to add 25 on the right. So negative 7 plus 46 is 39. So I add 25 to both sides of the equal sign to make it equal. This factors to this. You take the square root. 25 plus 39 is 64. Take the square root, and you go on from there. So the other thing I talked about are like these middle two, where a is not 1. And when a is not 1, you need a to be 1 to complete the square. So because 5 is not a perfect square, and even if it was a perfect square number, it makes it more difficult. So you have to factor out that 5. So I moved this 5 over to the right. I got equal 5. Factored out the 5. Now I have this that I have to complete the square. But this is multiplication, so I could divide by 5, and I get that to cancel. X squared plus 4x equals 1. So here I could complete the square. What's half of 4? 2. What's 2 squared? 4. So I get 4x plus 4. Now since I added 4 to that left side, I have to add 4 to the right side. And then this is x plus 2 times x plus 2 equals 5. Then you go on from there. So when a is not 1, you have to factor it out. So your choice to get 0 on the right or move the number, the c, to the right side. That's your choice. Okay, so now parabolas. Parabolas are the graphs of a quadratic. So there I have it, negative b over 2a. That was my error I do in following slides. So a parabola is symmetrical, and this one, it has this axis of symmetry, which is an x value right here. It has the x-intercepts, so now I'm using blue, which is the same color already there, where it crosses the x on 3 and negative 3. Here's the axis of symmetry on the x-axis, where you could fold this parabola in half. It's opening upwards. There's many things I could tell of this parabola. So axis of symmetry is also known as AOS. And the way you find that is negative b over 2a. That's where you find where you could fold your parabola in half. Now, when you've been solving and you find what x equals, you have been finding those x-intercepts. And then this one, it has a minimum. The vertex, the start of the parabola, that's the vertex. This one has a minimum because it's the lowest point. If it was the other way, you would have a maximum because this is the vertex and it's the highest point. So this is a max. Oops, that says max. Okay, but this blue parabola has a minimum. Okay, so let's find, this is all you have to do in the assignment, find the axis of symmetry and find the x-intercepts. So here we have an equation. I want 0 on the right because this is an equation that's equal to y because we are using it to graph a parabola. And on the x-axis, the x-intercepts, y is 0 because there are x points and your y value is 0. So 36 equals 0. Okay, so first thing I do, a is 1, b is 15, c is 36. So axis of symmetry, or you could put x equals negative b over 2a. I'm going to write it out here. Axis of symmetry, negative b divided by 2 times a. And I'm going to get a fancy highlighter, maybe a fancy blue. Axis of symmetry, that is your formula. Okay, so negative b, negative 15. So whatever b is, you take the opposite value. So b is positive 15, you take negative 15, and then 2 times a, so 2 times 1 is 2. It is fine to leave all these as fractions unless you're graphing, then you would need the decimal, but for this case, you could leave it as a fraction. So there's my first part of the problem, find the AOS, that's all you have to do in worksheet 1. And the second part is to factor. Now, since a is 1, I could go straight from x factor to the factors and then solve. So what two numbers multiply to 36 and add to 15? 12 times 3. So since a is 1, and only because a is 1, I could do 12x plus 12, x plus 3 equals 0. Now my x values are x equals negative 12, x equals negative 3. Those are the x-intercepts. So if I wanted a point, the point is x is negative 12, y is 0, because we put 0 in for y in this equation. And this point is x is negative 3, y is 0. So I'm going to underline in purple. In your assignment, I'd like, oops, that's not purple. I would like the axis of symmetry and your x-intercepts. And you could write x equals, or you could write the points. Okay, here is one, and C is 0. So C is 0 because there is nothing here. C is not 0 because of this equals 0. It's equals 0 because it's an equation. So you look for a common factor, and I mean, yeah, greatest common factor. So the one thing that they both have, since I don't have a C, is an x. So I take out that x, set it equal to 0. So now my two factors are these two things. And whenever you have an x outside, that just means x equals 0. Because zero product property, if this is 0, then this whole left side is 0. The second part, you set equal to 0, or use my little trick I said before, but I'll say it again. We're going to solve this for x. So whenever you have something like this that you're not really sure, not as easy as this x plus 12 to find the negative, what you do is take the negative sign, the opposite sign. So the opposite sign, this is a plus 2, so I'm going to say a minus 2, and you divide by 7. So you have the opposite of this number, minus 2, and then you divide by whatever is with the x, because we're always going to divide by whatever is with the x. Now AOS. AOS is A is 7, B is 2, and C is 0 because there's no 0 on the no C on the left-hand side. So AOS is negative 2, negative B, over 2 times C. 2 times 7 is 14. So you could do negative 2/14, you could do negative 1/7, or if you put in the calculator, that one's not going to be exact, that one's going to round, so negative 1/7 is a perfectly good answer for that. So that's all you have to do on this worksheet enrichment for week 3. The x-intercepts, the AOS, and then on your second worksheet you have to look at a graph and tell me what the AOS and the x-intercepts are. But if you're looking at a graph, it's pretty easy to tell. It's kind of like our last thing we did, where, yeah, I'm just checking the page, yeah. So it's like our last thing we did, where we're looking at this graph. And the AOS is right here on x equals 0. Remember, these are all x values, and your x-intercepts are negative 3 and 3 where it crosses. So let me know if you have any questions. Thank you. Sorry for the mix-up.